something that not a lot of the other students in this class like have. There's something that I have that they really don't. And so from then on, when I would ask that question, oh, what's your name and what's one interesting thing about yourself, I would say, oh, I know this question, like I got this. And the one interesting thing about myself, I will tell you in about like 10, 15 minutes. So pay attention to know that. And so we have been in this series called Heroes. It's on the screen, and we started it last week. And so Johnny laid a great foundation of what we're going to learn in this series. We're going to be learning about the heroes of the Old Testament. That's the first half of the Bible, and when like Israel was in like the land, the period of the judges, when they were under oppression of people, when they didn't want to be, then they cried out to God, and then God sent heroes to kind of rescue them, to kind of rule over them. And so we're going to be learning about how the Old Testament heroes were not only like given and delivered by God, but also that they were still human and that they eventually failed as well. And so each hero that God gives points forward to Jesus, the ultimate hero, who not only died, but also came back to life to give us eternal life. And so before we jump in, you have on your tables in front of you a note sheet. Go ahead and show me your note sheets. And if you don't have a note sheet, raise your hand and you will get a note sheet. Thank you. That's awesome. Perfect. And so we only have a couple fill-ins because we're going to be going through some Old Testament, which is usually like narrative. It's kind of long, kind of wordy, but we're going to go through it. And so there's not a lot of fill-ins on the front, but on the back, it's kind of like a little scavenger hunt. So if you're paying attention and you get 4 for 4, come up to me at the end, and I'll actually double what we gave you last night. So instead of 1, I'll give you 2 high fives. And so pay attention, write down the answers to the questions. Come up to me after, see if you got them right. And so with that, we're going to jump right in. But before we kind of understand, like unpack this section, we need to know like the context. Like, how do we get here? What is going on? What happened before this to lead us here? And so on your note sheets, there says at the top, a brief history of Israel so far. And so how did we get to the book of Judges? Well, Israel was slaves in Egypt way back in the first couple books of the Bible. They were living in Egypt as slaves, and they were like worked really hard. They were treated unfairly. They were under oppression, and so they were crying out to God, and then God gave them Moses. I know a couple of us are familiar with the character Moses. He freed them from with God's power, freed them from Egypt, and he brought forth the 10 plagues, like the frogs and locusts, and turned the water to blood. And he took them out of Egypt and parted the Red Seas with God's help, and he delivered them. That's called the Exodus, the book of Exodus. And so from slaves in Egypt to the Exodus from Egypt, so they were all taken out. There's a large group taken out. And then that led them to the 40 years of the wilderness wanderings. And so they were wandering about for 40 years, and Israel was continuing to like disobey God. They're like, hey, like, where are we going? Are we there yet? No, we're going to kind of worship other things because we don't really believe that God is who he says he is. And so 40 years in the wilderness. When I think of wilderness, I think of like the jungle, like trees, a lot of like streams, and just kind of like shrubbery and animals everywhere. But this wilderness was actually like a complete like wasteland, like a desert. Like there's rocks, there's no water, there's no food, there's like nothing. And so there's 40 years of just kind of wandering about in the wilderness. But then once the 40 years is over, God delivers his promise. He takes them to the land that he's promised, called the Promised Land. And when they enter, there are other people living in the land. They're like Canaanites and the Moabites. And so there's like evil people living in the land. And so now they're faced with another problem. And they are entered into the land that was promised, but they also have evil people living in the land. And so that brings us to the book of Judges. When they enter the promised land, now we are in the book of Judges. And so there's judges ruling over the land that God sends as they are being oppressed. And so let's go ahead and open up our Bibles to Judges chapter 3, verses 12 through 30. So the Bible should be on the tables right in front of you. Judges 3, chapter 3, verses 12 through 30. If you're there, shout out the page number so that we can all get there ourselves. And give me like a thumbs up when you reach it. Perfect. Excellent. So Judges chapter 3, verses 12 through 30. All right, so Judges chapter 3, verse 12, we're going to start. It says, it begins with the word again. So verse 12 says, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And so this word again is very important because it just shows that, like, once again, like it's happened before and it's now happening again. So again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And because they did this evil, the Lord gave Eglon, king of Moab, power over Israel. And so Israel was disobeying. They were trying to worship other gods. And so God says, all right, I'm going to give Moab to rule over you, similar to Egypt. And so they weren't far off from where they just came from. And so getting verse 13, the Amorites and the Amalekites to join him, Eglon came and attacked Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. And so we are kind of right back where we started. Israel is under oppression again because of the disobedience. And so verse 14 says, the Israelites were subject to Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. And so no one sitting here today is over, like a student is over 18 years old. And so this is like if you were born the very first year that they were overcome, that you would be 18 years old by the time that you were freed. And so this is a significant long time. And so what's so interesting about like a narrative portion is that in one line, oh, they were subject for 18 years. Like that's 18 years of their life. Like that's a long time. And so the Israelites were subject to Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. And so verse 15 says, again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer. And so this word again, we see it one more time. And so this is to show kind of like a repetition, like a pattern of what is happening. So again, Israelites did evil, and again, they cried out to the Lord. And so this is nothing new. Israel is not crying out for the first time. This has likely happened many, many times. And so the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer once again. He gave them Ehud, a left-handed man, son of Gera the Benjamite. The Israelites sent him, Ehud, with a tribute, like a bribe, to Eglon, king of Moab. And so this is interesting because why does it tell us that Ehud is left-handed? Well, it was most likely because being left-handed in that time was not seen as like a good thing. Like everyone was like right-handed. He was from Benjamin, which means son of the right hand. And so being left-handed in a tribe that was son of the right hand meant that he was like the opposite. He was like wrong. He was like an outcast. No one probably liked him. So they're like, hey, we have this tribe to try to get on like our king's good side. And so who do we have here to send this bribe? Just in case it goes south, like who is expendable essentially? And so they said, oh, Ehud, because he's left-handed. He's probably not very well liked. And so we'll send him. And so if he gives the king the bribe and the king says, thank you, like that's great. But if he is upset and he's angry and he kills Ehud, like that wouldn't be the worst thing to ever happen because no one really liked him. And so they selected Ehud, probably not a great promotion by him, to give Eglon like a bribe, saying like, hey, we know that you're powerful, more powerful than us. And so please accept what we have to like try to get on your good side, like show some mercy to us. And so verse 16 says, now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about a cubit long. So that's like a foot and a half, which he strapped to his right thigh under his clothing. So this is important. So he strapped it on his right thigh, like under his clothing. So it was like hidden under his clothes on his right side. 17, he presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab, who was a very fat man. And so this is also very interesting. Not only do we learn that Ehud is left-handed, it's kind of weird, but we also learn that the king is fat. And so again, like in this time, when you were powerful, when you had a lot of money, you were able to spend it on like an abundance of like resources. Resources was scarce, money was scarce. And so if you had a lot of money, a lot of power, you could just buy like a ton of food. You could have like people deliver food for you, and all you would have to do is just sit and eat. Like he didn't have to do any hard work physically. He didn't have to work the fields, do like build anything. He just sat there. He's like, oh, I have all this money. I'm gonna spend it on food. I'm gonna eat it, and I'm gonna gain a little weight. So I'm gonna be a very fat man, as the Bible tells us. And so we learned that Ehud is left-handed. He made a double-edged sword about a foot and a half long attached to his right thigh under his clothing, and that the king was fat. And so with that, we can move on to verse 18. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way those who had carried it. And so he had people behind him carrying what he was going to give. And so he's like, all right, we made it. Like, you guys can get out of here. This is fine. Thank you for your help. Goodbye. 19. But on reaching the stone images near Gilgal, he himself went back to Eglon and said, Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you. And so he's kind of like casting like a line for the king to like bite. He wants to like tell something to the king. He has like a plan in his mind. So he's like, I have the latest celebrity gossip to tell you. Like, this stuff that I have is good stuff. You're going to want to know this. And so he says, Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you. The king says to his attendants, leave us. And so the king's like, all of my guys get out of here. This is important. This is one-on-one. Me and Ehud, like, this is going to be good. What you have to tell me, I want to know. So everyone get out of here. Get out of the way. And they all left. And then verse 20, Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace and said, I have a message from God for you. And the king rose from his seat. Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. So he stabbed the king. Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in around it. And so we see that he killed the king. We see that some gross stuff happened, and that he let go of the sword and he just absorbed it in his body. I don't know exactly. I don't know, lost in translation or something. But this is very interesting, and this is very weird. But what we can learn from this very weird, just very bizarre text is that Ehud was unique. He was not like the other people of the tribe of Benjamin where he was from. He was left-handed. He was brave and courageous. And he used his uniqueness to kind of outwit the king that was overpowering Israel. And so this is like back in the time when you would like meet someone new, you would usually always have like weapons on you. And so even like today we shake hands. It's like it's a formality. You want like a good firm handshake to make like a good impression. But back then you would like shake your right hand, you extend your right hand to show that you don't have any weapons. Because if you had like a sword or like a dagger or something, everyone was right-handed, so they would strap it to their left thigh. And so they easily be able to like reach out and like start fighting. But if you like met someone like a king or like an enemy, you would extend your right hand and say like, I come in peace. Like, my name is Jonathan. I'm not here to hurt you. Like, take my hand, my only working hand, like shake it so you know that I don't have any intent to hurt you. And so maybe Ehud was like extending his right hand. He's like, hi, my name is Ehud. He's like, just kidding. I'm going to stab you. And so he's left-handed, placed it on his right thigh, and then used that to stab the king. So he was different. He was unique. He was left-handed. And so in verse 23, it says, then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. And so he's like, all right, I killed the king. I lost my sword. There's a mess on the ground. Like, I just got to get out of here. So he locks the door behind him and then he books it. He's leaving. He's so gone. And so verse 24 says, after he had gone, the servants came and found the doors of the upper room locked. They said he must be relieving himself in the upper room of the palace. And then it says they waited to the point of embarrassment. But when he did not open the doors of the room, they took a key and unlocked it. There they saw their lord, so their most powerful person, fallen on the floor dead. And so this line, they waited to the point of embarrassment. You know, like whenever you're either at like dinner with family and friends, and then your brother or your friend is like, oh, excuse me, like, I'm just going to go to the bathroom real quick, just like wash my hands. And so they leave, and then you're waiting there, and they're gone. And then it's been like 5 minutes. Like, oh, okay, no worries. And then like the food comes, and you're like, do we like start eating the food? Like, do we just wait for them? Like, what's going on? Like 10, 15 minutes pass, and you're like, oh, like, are they okay? Should we like go and help them? Like, this is kind of embarrassing for us because now we are embarrassed that like they're going to come in and be embarrassed. And so the servants were probably asking like, what did the king eat? Like, is the king lactose intolerant? Can he not like digest the dairy? Like, is he good? And so like, all right, we can't wait any longer. Like, it's been way too long. So we got a key. We're going to open the door. And they see the king dead. They see a complete mess. They see their king on the floor. And so this is very bad news for them because they know that something bad has happened. So verse 26, while they waited, Ehud got away. He passed by the stone images and escaped to Sirah. And so not only did Ehud kill the king, but he was able to just leave real quick, get like a huge head start. He locked the door so they couldn't find out what happened for a little while. And then 27, when he arrived there, he blew a trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hills, with him, Ehud, leading Israel, them. And so, verse 28, follow me, he ordered, for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands. And so, this is really interesting as well, because Ehud says, follow me. He doesn't say, I killed the king, like I did all this, follow me so we can kill him and I can get the glory. No, he says, follow me, for the Lord has given Moab into your hands. And so, not only is he courageous, not only is he smart and outwit the king, but he's also humble as well. He says, like, he did something himself, but he couldn't have done it without the Lord. So he says, the Lord has given them into your hands. So follow me and let's defeat them together. And so they followed him and took possession of the fords of the Jordan that led to Moab. They allowed no one to cross over. So this was intense. It was efficient, and it was just good. It was such a good victory for Israel. And so at that time, verse 29, they struck down about 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong. Not one escaped. And then verse 30, the most important verse of this whole section, says, that day Moab was made subject to Israel, and so now Israel ruled over Moab, and the land had peace for 80 years. And so Israel was subject under Moab. We started the story with them being oppressed by Moab. They were subject for 18 years. That's longer than any of us has been alive. But Moab was now made subject to Israel by the power of God for 80 years. And so that is a huge amount of time. In the time of the Judges, the book of the Judges takes place over 400 years. And this 80 years where Moab was made subject to Israel, the 80 years is the longest time of peace. And so Ehud not only killed the king and delivered Israel, but he was humble about it. And he, by the power of God, gave Israel 80 years of peace, the longest they've had in the time of the Judges. And so with that is the story of Ehud. He was a left-handed man who killed a fat king. He was courageous and he was humble, and he delivered Israel by the power of God and gave them peace for 80 years. And so on the outside, Ehud was not impressive. He was left-handed, kind of weird, probably awkward, not anything to like write home about. He was just a guy. He was also from the tribe of Benjamin, which means the son of the right hand. And so to be of the left hand, like the right hand of God is like the highest power and authority, like the highest place. And so anything like left of that, anything on the opposite side was like the opposite. It was considered wrong. It was considered bad. And so he was probably not very well liked. But after this, he was probably like the talk of the town. He was probably a very popular man. So he was unique in what others saw as like weird and shameful and not very interesting. God used for good, and he used it to deliver Israel. And so real quick, can anyone relate to Ehud? Is anyone in this room left-handed? Raise your hands high, like high and proud. This is great. This is a lot more than last night. We left-handed people, like we got to stick together, because we are living in a world created for and by right-handed people. And if you're left-handed, I know that you know what I'm talking about. When you try to cut with scissors, they don't work. When you like start cooking, can openers, they don't work for you. I have a deck of cards because one of my favorite things to do is play cards. And even cards, believe it or not, are created for and by right-handed people. And so, Aiden, my left-handed friend, come on up here and demonstrate this for me. Give him a hand. This is Aiden, everyone. He is my coworker and my good friend, and he's going to demonstrate our pain as left-handed people playing cards. And so we all know that when you play cards, the suit and the card is, on the top left. Like this. And so this is how normal people, right-handed people, play the game. They fan their cards like this. But as left-handed people, I fan my cards with my left thumb. I do it the other side. And so let's see that. And so as you can see, I don't know what cards I have in my hands whenever I play cards. And so whenever I play, I have to like stack the cards in my hands at a certain way. And it's just weird. It's just kind of awkward. And so every time I play cards, not only am I very bad at the game, but I'm also reminded that I'm left-handed and that I don't really fit in. And so give it up for Aiden, everyone. My friend and my left-handed man. Thank you, Aiden. And so now, whenever you play cards and your friend is left-handed, just say, like, I get it. I get what you go through, and I understand. I can empathize with you. And so I'm also left-handed. My right hand is small. If you didn't know that, I'll show you after. But the truth is, that was like a silly example. It's not a huge deal. They actually make left-handed like decks of cards where the suit is on the other side, and I kind of want to get one. But I am left-handed. That is my one unique trait. I say, well, I'm Jonathan, and I'm left-handed, and there's not a lot of people that are left-handed, so that makes me unique. That makes you unique. But the truth is that everyone in this room, right and left-handed or ambidextrous both, we are all unique in our own ways. So some enjoy like arts and crafts, some do theater, some are really good at sports. Some can just manipulate a computer in insane ways, while some are just not tech savvy. They can like read books and learn new information. And so whatever attributes that we have personally can be completely unique and can also be used to serve God in different ways. And so your uniqueness can be used to serve on tech. It can be on the band if you're good at singing. It can be like tearing down and setting up for your students to come and experience the Lord. So maybe even that you experience this really difficult and really painful but unique time in your life, that by the grace of God you were able to like endure. You're able to kind of make it through. And so maybe not a lot of people that like have gone through the same things you have, but when they do, when your friends do, you can say, hey, like I've been there before. I know how you feel. I know the hurt you feel because I've been there too. Like this experience was unique to me, but now I can shepherd you. And so there's a time for your uniqueness to serve others. You can like serve on tech, you can serve like in church, and you can teach from others. But there's also seasons where you can learn from other people's uniqueness. There's seasons for teaching, for serving and forgiving, but there's also seasons of receiving and learning as well. And so even if you don't think you're special or unique, just know that God created you with a purpose and a plan. And so the first fill in on your note sheet is the truth that I was created with a purpose. I was created with a purpose. So I was created with a purpose. When you read that, tell yourself the truth that you were created with a purpose. Did even if you don't think that you were like interesting or that you have a purpose, just look at a couple examples in the Bible. Did people think that Moses was unique when he had like a speech impediment? He started, and he also had really bad anger issues. Did people think that Moses would be able to lead Israel with the power of God out of Egypt into the promised land? Or even uh, David, the runt, the smallest of his brothers, couldn't lift the sword, didn't fit in the armor. Did people think that he could defeat Goliath, the huge man who was just overpowering them? Did people think that that in John 4 that Jesus would use this woman who has like a really bad past to evangelize to an entire town? Or even Jesus used like tax collectors and fishermen, just random normal people, to begin the most important ministry of the world. In Jesus' own life, even, he was just a humble man who was human, just like all of us, and he lived, and then he died a death he didn't deserve, but he is the ultimate hero of our own lives when he rose again just 3 days later. And so God created you with a purpose, and he created you to do great things and to praise and to glorify him. And so your uniqueness doesn't make you any less than others. It doesn't make you wrong or anything. It makes you different so that you can use that to glorify God. And so it's not on your note sheets or on the screen. It was Psalm 139:13 through 14. It says, "For you, God, created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb." So this is God's intentionality when creating me and all of you. And he says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm made unique. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well." And then even in Isaiah 64:8, again, not on the notes, it was a very last minute addition. It says, "Yet you, Lord, are our Father. We are the clay and you are the potter. We are all works of your hand. And so if you are into like ceramics or pottery, you know that like a skilled potter can create 100 different vessels, like 100 different cups, for example. And each cup was made for a purpose, but each cup is going to be unique because you can't recreate something perfect exactly 100% of the time. And so God is the potter and he formed us with his hands for a purpose, with a purpose, but we are all unique and different from one another. And so as the band comes on up to lead us in one final song of worship, I want to leave you with a question to ask yourself throughout this week and throughout the rest of the summer as you enter into the new school semester. The question is, what makes me unique? So the last question is, what makes me unique? So what makes me unique? And this is not like, oh, like, do I have green eyes, blue eyes? Do I have like black hair? Do I have blonde? This is not like a physical like attribute. It's what am I passionate about? What do I love to do that is unique that can serve God? Like, what did God create me to do? What did he create me for? And so in this next song, we're going to sing to God. We're going to say, I am who you say I am. And so we're going to, my prayer is that we would just like worship God, that we would ask, like, that we would just declare, I am who you say I am. And then spend some time dwelling on who he says you are, what you were created and even designed for. And so during the next song of worship, I would just ask that you like pay attention and focus and say the words, I am who you say I am. Like I am who God created me to be. And so before we jump in, we're going to go ahead and pray before we worship. Lord, thank you so much for just this time of learning and understanding about our uniqueness and about our just our own lives and how we can use our differences to serve you. I pray that we would have confidence in who you created us to be and pray that we'd be able to use our uniqueness to serve you, to serve others, and to just show the love that you have showed us when you created us uniquely. So we give this morning and this week to you. And in Jesus' name, we all said, Amen.